There is a woman who has stood at the center of the world's gaze for over a decade, and, yet somehow, in February of 2026, she managed to make the entire planet stop and look again, not because she wore something new, but because she wore something old, and it hit differently this time. There is something quietly radical about a princess who walks into Britain's most glamorous night carrying a gown she first wore 7 years ago, jewels that belonged to queens long gone, and a composure that no amount of illness, grief, or public scrutiny had managed to crack. Catherine, Princess of Wales, did not need to announce her return. She simply showed up. And that, in itself, was the whole story. February 2026 was not just a month in Catherine's calendar. It was a statement written across every outfit she wore, every room she entered, and every choice she made about what to put on her body before walking out into the world's flashbulbs. She had been absent from the BAFTA red carpet since 2023. The years in between had carried more weight than most people carry in a lifetime: a cancer diagnosis, surgery, treatment, recovery, the long and private road back to health. The world had watched and worried and waited. And then, she came back, quietly at first, and then, in February, with something approaching full force. The month began not on a red carpet but on a rainy hillside in Wales, which is exactly the kind of beginning that tells you everything about who Catherine has become. On the very first days of February, she and Prince William made their way to Melon Tregwent, a woolen mill tucked into the Welsh landscape that has been producing textiles since the 17th century. This was not a grand occasion. There were no crowds in ball gowns, no chandeliers, no photographers jostling for the perfect angle at the bottom of a staircase. There was rain, and wool, and the particular quiet warmth of a place that makes things by hand the way people have always made things by hand. What Catherine wore to that mill visit became one of the most talked about fashion moments of her month, which says something interesting about the way people watch her. She debuted a coat made by Melon Tregwent itself, the vintage Dillard DWYRYD Simru coat, in a shade of tangerine orange that stopped people cold. Orange is a color Catherine almost never wears. Her wardrobe leans toward the cool and the classic: navy, cream, forest green, the occasional bold red. Orange is warm and spontaneous and a little unexpected, and personal stylist Leanne Jones noted that it conveys exactly those qualities: warmth, energy, a kind of spontaneous ease that the occasion seemed to call for. She paired it with olive green Victoria Beckham trousers, which was its own kind of quiet boldness, two strong colors, worn together without apology, grounded and vivid at once. But, beyond the color, beyond the cut of the coat and the way it caught the grey Welsh light, there was something more deliberate happening in that choice. Catherine did not arrive at a mill that makes Welsh textiles wearing a gown from Paris or a jacket from Milan. She wore the mill. She wore the place. The coat was made from the very fabric produced on the loom she had come to celebrate, and, in doing so, she made her support for Welsh craft not just a talking point but a wearable fact. This is one of the things Catherine has become extraordinarily good at over the years, using clothing as a kind of living diplomacy. The outfit is never just an outfit. It is always also a message, sent in the language of fabric and color to whoever is paying attention. Her choice to wear British and Welsh designers or to return to pieces already in her wardrobe rather than commissioning something entirely new is a pattern that runs through her entire public fashion history, but it has sharpened and deepened in recent years. There is a sustainability argument embedded in her wardrobe choices that fashion analysts have been noting with increasing admiration. She re-wears. She restyles. She takes a dress she wore to a charity gala in 2019 and brings it to the BAFTAs in 2026 and, somehow, inexplicably, it feels just as alive as the first time. She takes a coat from a Welsh mill and makes it feel like the most important garment in any room. This is not accident. It is craft. The Wales visit itself, at Melon Tregwent, carried the kind of warmth that makes for good television but also feels completely genuine when you read the accounts of the people who were there. Catherine and William walked through the mill, talked to the weavers, learned about the process of turning raw wool into the fine fabric that has put this particular corner of Pembrokeshire on the map. There is a long tradition of Welsh textile making that connects to the landscape itself, the sheep, the land, the water, the hands of generations of craftspeople, and Catherine arrived dressed in that tradition, wearing it literally on her body, which is the kind of symbolic gesture that cannot be manufactured. It either lands or it doesn't. On that rainy February day in Wales, it landed. It is worth pausing here to think about what these early February outings meant in the context of her recovery. Catherine had been through something that most people in the public eye do not survive with their dignity fully intact. Cancer is not merely a medical event. It is a reorganization of the self, a confrontation with mortality that changes the way a person moves through the world. She had spoken about this, carefully and, on her own terms, in the video she released in March 2025, the one that was filmed in a garden, with her hair loose and her voice steady, where she spoke about finishing her treatment and said she was not fully out of the woods but was moving forward. That video was watched by millions of people who had been quietly carrying worry about her for months. It was one of the most significant royal communications in recent memory, not because of its politics or its protocol, but because of its simple, human honesty. What February 2026 represented, then, was not just a return to public duties in the logistical sense. It was a return in the deeper sense, a reappearance of Catherine as a fully present, fully engaged person, one who had thought carefully about what she wanted to say and how she wanted to say it, and who was now saying it through the clothes she chose, the community she visited, the causes she showed up for, and the way she carried herself through all of it. The tangerine-coated melon tregwent was the opening sentence of a paragraph that would build, through the month of February, toward the extraordinary BAFTA night that everyone would end up talking about for weeks. But, before that night came, there was more to say. Children's Mental Health Week fell in the second week of February, between the 9th and the 15th, and Catherine marked it with a visit to Castle Hill Academy in New Addington, Croydon. This is one of her most long-standing and genuinely personal patronages. She has been patron of Place 2B since 2012, in the earliest days of her royal life, and her investment in children's mental health and early childhood development has only grown deeper and more substantive over the years. The Royal Foundation Centre for Early Childhood, which she chairs, has produced frameworks and research that have become serious reference points in the field. This is not celebrity patronage. It is real, sustained, substantive work. And, when she walks into a school during Mental Health Week, the staff and children are not merely receiving a royal visit. They are receiving someone who has actually read the research, who knows the field, who can talk in detail about what Place 2B's whole school approach involves and why it matters. For this visit, she dressed in the language of approachability rather than grandeur. A structured blazer by Petr Petrov in a warm brown shade, the same jacket she had first worn in February 2025, brought back into service worn over chocolate brown cigarette trousers and a dusty blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up. The sleeves rolled up. It is a small detail, but, in the vocabulary of royal dressing, it carries weight. Rolled sleeves say, "I am here to be present, not to be observed. I am not performing ceremony. I am showing up for something real." She broke one of her own best-known style habits on this occasion as well, swapping her usual heels for a pair of flat brown penny loafers from Bowden, practical, clean, grounded. Right for a day spent crouching next to children in an art studio, sitting with families in a school corridor, talking directly to young people about what it feels like to belong. CEO of Place 2B, Catherine Roche, spoke afterwards about the quality of the princess's presence. She described how one of the team had mentioned to Catherine that it was a young girl's birthday, and Catherine had immediately sought the child out to wish her a happy birthday personally. It is the kind of gesture that is impossible to manufacture and impossible to forget if you were that child. It is also, in a way, the whole point of what Catherine has been trying to build throughout her years of public work, not spectacle, but genuine human connection, one person at a time, in rooms that are not glamorous but matter deeply. The brown outfit and the flat shoes and the rolled-up sleeves were not a fashion statement in the conventional sense. They were a statement of intent. They said, "This is the work I came to do, and I dressed for the work, not for the photographs." And yet the photographs were beautiful anyway, because the woman inside the clothes was so completely, visibly herself. The middle of February brought a different kind of occasion, quieter, more private in its symbolism, but significant in a way that fashion writers and royal watchers noted carefully. On February 5, the Prince and Princess of Wales visited Lambeth Palace to meet the Most Reverend Sarah Mullally, the newly appointed 106th Archbishop of Canterbury and the first woman ever to hold that position. It was a historic meeting in every sense, a princess meeting a woman who had just broken through one of the oldest institutional ceilings in British religious life, in a palace that has been the seat of the Archbishop since the 13th century. The weight of that meeting required a particular kind of dressing, not flashy, not diminishing, but appropriate to the gravity and the moment. Catherine chose monochrome brown from head to toe, and executed it with the precision of someone who understands that a single, sustained color note can carry more authority than a dozen competing ones. A bespoke chocolate brown dress by Edeline Lee, with long sleeves and a belted waist, worn beneath a new coat in the same near-identical hue by Catherine Walker, the design house that dressed Princess Diana, and which Catherine has returned to repeatedly throughout her royal life as a quiet act of continuity and tribute. The shoes were John Vito Rossi's John Vito 105 pumps in the same chocolate shade. She added a new gold necklace, a Gold Keeper's heart trace chain by Daniela Draper, which caught the light with a warm, understated shimmer. Everything in the same color family. Everything deliberately, meticulously aligned. The choice of Catherine Walker for an occasion of this kind deserves more than a passing mention. When people write about royal fashion, they often focus on the big names: Alexander McQueen, Jenny Packham, Gucci, and these are significant choices with their own meanings. But Catherine Walker is different. The house was founded in 1977 by the Belgian-born designer Marie-Lise Gress, who took the name Catherine Walker after her late husband. Princess Diana was one of the house's most famous clients, and the dresses Walker designed for Diana, the structured, elegant pieces that Diana wore on state visits and at formal occasions around the world, are among the most iconic images in royal fashion history. When Catherine, Princess of Wales, chooses a Catherine Walker coat or gown, she is doing something layered. She is wearing a designer who dressed the mother of her husband. She is stitching herself into a visual history that connects her to Diana without ever being explicit about it. It is a thread of continuity, worn rather than spoken. For the Lambeth Palace visit, the complete monochrome look in deep chocolate brown felt appropriate to the context in another way: it was the color of serious intention. Brown is not festive. It is not diplomatic red or celebratory white or the classic navy of institutional occasions. It is warm but grounded, contemporary but not showy. It said, "I came here in substance, not performance." And, in a meeting with the first female Archbishop of Canterbury, who had herself spent decades in serious work as a nurse, a chief nursing officer, a Bishop of Crediton, before ascending to the most senior position in the Church of England, substance was exactly the right register. These mid-February engagements form an important part of the story that often gets overlooked when people write about Catherine's fashion that month, because the BAFTA night was so visually spectacular that it tends to consume all the attention. But the quiet public work, the school visits, the church meetings, the Heritage Mill tours, is where the consistency of her thinking becomes most visible. The orange coat at Mellon Tregwent was about Welsh identity and craft. The rolled-up sleeves and flat shoes at Castle Hill Academy were about presence and accessibility. The monochrome Catherine Walker at Lambeth Palace was about gravity and respect and the particular kind of dignity that belongs to a woman meeting another woman who has just made history. And all of these choices, made in different rooms for different purposes, added up to a month of dressing that was more coherent and more intentional than almost anything happening in professional fashion during the same weeks. Then came February 22nd. Then came the BAFTAs. The 79th British Academy Film Awards were held at the Royal Festival Hall on London's South Bank, and, from the moment it was confirmed that Catherine and William would attend, fashion editors and royal correspondents began speculating about what she would wear. She had been absent from the BAFTA red carpet since 2023, when she had worn a reworked Alexander McQueen gown with long opera gloves, one of her most visually striking appearances in years. Before that, in 2020, she had appeared in a gold-embroidered Alexander McQueen embellished with hibiscus flowers, reworn from a tour of Southeast Asia almost a decade earlier and altered to give it a new life. The pattern of thoughtful, sustainable rewearing had become one of the defining characteristics of her BAFTA appearances specifically. She arrives. She dazzles. And she does it without buying anything new. In 2026, she continued the pattern and somehow managed to make it feel like the most sophisticated fashion decision of the entire award season. She wore a Gucci gown she had first appeared in on February 13, 2019, over 7 years earlier, at a gala dinner at the V&A Museum in aid of a mental health initiative for schools. The gown was bespoke, a two-tone confection in raspberry and rose pink, constructed in layers of floaty fabric that moved like water, tied at the waist with a burgundy velvet belt that cinched everything into an hourglass silhouette so clean it looked painted. The shoulder-grazing V-neck, the skirt that existed somewhere between a ball gown and a dream. Everything about the cut read as deliberately, consciously romantic. She wore it in 2019 with the same burgundy Prada clutch she brought to the BAFTAs. She wore it with the same Oscar de la Renta sparkling pumps. She had not reworked it. She had not altered the sleeves or changed the neckline or added different elements the way she had with other reworn gowns. She wore it exactly as it was, 7 years later, and it caused exactly the same reaction it had in 2019, which is to say, something between admiration and wonder-struck silence. Fashion expert Lauren Bulla, speaking on behalf of OLBG, put it plainly when she said that in a world of fast fashion and ever-changing trends, rewearing an ensemble makes the statement that newness is not required for excitement. This is a truth that the fashion industry acknowledges in principle but resists in practice, because the fashion industry's entire economic model is built on the premise that last season's gown is not as exciting as next season's. Catherine has spent more than a decade doing the quiet work of disproving that premise, and the 2026 BAFTA moment was its most crystalline demonstration yet. The gown was 7 years old. The gown was stunning. These two facts existed simultaneously and, without contradiction. She wore it with jewels from the royal collection that carried their own extraordinary weight of history. The earrings were the Greville chandelier earrings, platinum-set Cartier diamonds, commissioned sometime between 1918 and 1929 by the society hostess Margaret Greville, bequeathed to the Queen Mother, and eventually passed to Queen Elizabeth II. They are pieces that have been worn at some of the most significant moments in 20th-century royal history. When Catherine wears them, she is not merely wearing jewelry. She is wearing the collected formal life of women who came before her, the Queen Mother standing in the rubble of the Blitz, the late Queen in audiences with presidents and prime ministers across 7 decades. The earrings carry that weight, and Catherine carries the earrings, and somehow the whole ensemble stays light. She also wore Queen Mary's Art Deco choker bracelet, another piece from the royal collection with deep roots in the family's history. The effect of all these elements together, the romantic pink gown, the ancient diamonds, the burgundy belt, the loose brunette waves, the warm brown smoky eye and the wash of rose lipstick, was something that fashion writers struggled to fully articulate because it existed outside the usual categories. It was not merely elegant. It was not merely beautiful. It was a full statement about time and continuity and the way that something truly made can outlast the moment of its making. A gown commissioned in 2019 that still earns gasps in 2026. Diamonds commissioned a century ago that still catch the light on a contemporary red carpet. A woman who went through the hardest years of her life and came out the other side with her sense of herself not just intact but somehow deepened. Prince William wore a dark burgundy velvet tuxedo jacket, an unusually bold departure from traditional black tie, and, in doing so, created something that fashion reporters noted immediately. His jacket matched the burgundy belt of her gown almost exactly. It was a coordination that the Wales family never does overtly, never announces, never makes the focus of their public appearances. They arrived in complementary colors as if by accident, and photographers noticed, and the images of them walking the red carpet together, her in pink and burgundy, him in deep red, looked like the cover of something. A love story, maybe. Or a return. Their return to the BAFTAs together was their first joint appearance at the ceremony since 2023. In the years between, Catherine had been absent from the ceremony entirely, and William had attended once without her. The context surrounding their 2026 appearance was also shaped by the broader royal family's position that month. News had broken about serious allegations involving Prince Andrew, and the palace had issued a statement, and King Charles had made a public appearance at London Fashion Week just hours after his brother's arrest. The royal family was, as it has been at several points in the last decade, navigating a period of significant institutional pressure. Against that background, Catherine and William's appearance on the BAFTA red carpet, color-coordinated and composed, carried meaning beyond the personal. It was a portrait of stability, broadcast from a red carpet to anyone paying attention. Catherine's return itself had been the subject of particular anticipation among royal watchers and fashion followers. She had been absent in 2024 while recovering from her cancer surgery, her absence explained only later when she released the video that confirmed her diagnosis. She had been absent in 2025 because the ceremony fell during her children's school half-term, a decision that was entirely consistent with the priority she and William have always placed on their family's normal rhythms over royal obligation. Her return in 2026 was therefore her first BAFTA attendance in 3 years, and her first since the world had learned everything it had learned about what she had been through. She walked onto that red carpet having survived something profound, wearing a gown she had worn 7 years earlier and diamonds that were 100 years old, and she looked, in the words of the fashion stylist Sion Clark, like someone whose signature style had truly come to life. The morning after the BAFTAs, the photographs were everywhere, on the front pages of newspapers, across social media, in the fashion sections of every major publication that covers royal style. And the conversation that followed was interesting because it was not simply a conversation about beauty or glamour or the relative merits of Gucci versus Alexander McQueen. It was a conversation about values. About what it means to rewear a gown in a culture that continuously demands the new. About what kind of message a princess sends when she walks into the most watched red carpet in British culture carrying a gown from 2019 and diamonds from 1929 and a composure that belongs entirely to the present. Fashion expert Lauren Bulla's comment that newness need not equate to excitement resonated beyond the fashion world because it captured something that people across all kinds of contexts have been trying to say for a while. The cult of newness is exhausting. The pressure to constantly consume, constantly update, constantly present an upgraded version of the self, it costs something, economically and psychologically and environmentally. Catherine's BAFTA appearance did not solve any of these problems, but it demonstrated, in one of the most visible arenas imaginable, that the alternative was not dowdiness or defeat. The alternative could be a pink Gucci gown that made everyone in the room forget how long ago it was made. The alternative could be something better than new. Something lasting. This is a conversation Catherine's wardrobe has been quietly having with the world for years, but February 2026 was the month it spoke loudest. The orange coat from Melon Tregwent was made from Welsh wool, produced by Welsh hands, worn to celebrate Welshcraft. The brown Petr Petrov jacket at Castle Hill Academy had first appeared in February 2025, 1 year earlier, and was back again, doing exactly the same work in a different context. The Gucci gown was 7 years old. The Greville earrings were between 90 and 100 years old. The Catherine Walker coat was a tribute to a design house that had dressed another Princess of Wales in another era. Across the entire month, Catherine's clothing choices formed an argument about the relationship between value and time, that the things most worth having are the things that last, and that lasting things deserve to be used and reused and honored. The conversation around sustainability in fashion is one that the industry has handled with varying degrees of sincerity. Many brands use the language of sustainability while continuing practices that contradict it. Many public figures make grand gestures about the environment while maintaining consumption habits that are privately extraordinary. Catherine's approach is different in a specific way, it is consistent and it is enacted rather than announced. She does not give speeches about the importance of rewearing clothing. She simply rewears her clothing, and lets the clothing speak. The gown at the BAFTAs spoke. The loafers at Castle Hill Academy spoke. The mill coat in Wales spoke. She has never needed to frame any of it as a message about sustainability, the choices themselves carry the message, and the message is the more powerful for being implicit. For days after the BAFTAs, on February 26, Catherine and William were back in Wales, this time in Powys, a county in Mid Wales known for having the highest number of volunteers per capita anywhere in the United Kingdom. They had come to mark the community spirit of the region ahead of St. David's Day on March 1, and the day was full and humid and occasionally soaking wet, because Welsh February does not typically accommodate the requirements of royal visits. They played rock, paper, scissors with children in the rain. William asked locals for Welsh music playlist recommendations. Catherine crouched next to a baby named Arthur and was apparently amused when he tried to eat his mother's business card. For this visit, she was dressed in a deep monochromatic burgundy ensemble that photographers described as one of the most beautifully considered looks of her recent public appearances. A new Alexander McQueen coat is structured, with a split collar running from the neckline to the waist, raised shoulders, and gently flared cuffs worn over a piece from CO, a British brand known for its clean, feminine tailoring. The knife pleats of the CO skirt were visible beneath the coat's hem, creating a layered texture that felt appropriate to the occasion. Formal enough for a royal engagement, warm enough for a day spent talking to families in a community cafe and playing games with children in a downpour. She wore deep burgundy Gianvito Rossi boots. A daffodil pin was attached to her lapel, the national flower of Wales, as it was on William's jacket. Together, they wore the colours of the Welsh landscape, deep reds and golds, earthy and rooted. Catherine has worn Alexander McQueen throughout her royal life more consistently than any other single design house, and the coat she wore in Powys was another demonstration of why the relationship works so well. McQueen, founded by the late Lee Alexander McQueen and now steward by creative director Sean McGurr, makes clothes that are tailored to within a millimeter of perfect, with architectural details that reward close attention. The split collar on the Powys coat was not a decorative flourish. It was a structural decision that drew the eye from the neckline to the waist, elongating the figure and creating a strong vertical line that read clearly even through rain and in crowded outdoor spaces. It is dressing for the actual conditions of public life, not just for photographs taken in controlled light. This is another of Catherine's signature competencies. She chooses clothes that work in the real world, in the real weather, in front of real people who are close enough to notice the details. The daffodil pin is worth dwelling on for a moment, because it represents a kind of fashion communication that operates almost entirely in symbol. Catherine often wears small symbolic accessories on visits to particular communities: a Welsh dragon brooch in Wales, a thistle for Scotland, a shamrock for St. Patrick's Day, the white rose of Yorkshire when visiting that county. These are not accidental. They are the product of careful thought about what it means to arrive somewhere as a representative of the crown and to signal, through the smallest possible gesture, that you know where you are and why it matters. The daffodil on the lapel of a burgundy McQueen coat in the rain in Powys was one of the most eloquent fashion gestures of her month, and it was a single pin. The February 26 Wales visit was her sixth public engagement of the month, and it rounded out a period that had covered an enormous range of registers: Heritage Mill tourism in tangerine orange, school visits in practical brown, historic religious meetings in monochrome luxury, a film awards red carpet in romantic pink and century-old diamonds, and a community day in Welsh colours in the driving rain. No two outings looked the same. No two outings called for the same kind of dressing. And, yet across all of them, the approach was consistent, purpose-driven, historically informed, locally resonant, and built on foundations of quality, of longevity, of genuine attention to context that run all the way through her fashion philosophy. What emerges from a close look at Catherine's February 2026 style is something that goes beyond fashion analysis. It is a portrait of a woman who has thought very seriously about the relationship between clothing and meaning, and who has developed, over more than a decade of public life, a vocabulary of dress that is genuinely her own. It was not always so refined. The early years of her royal life were marked by choices that were lovely but sometimes tentative: a lot of neutral color, a lot of safe cuts, a reluctance to take visual risks. She dressed, in those early years, as someone who was learning the rules of a very particular game. Now she moves through public life as someone who has long since mastered the rules and is operating at a level beyond them. The cancer diagnosis and treatment that kept her out of public view for much of 2024 and into 2025 seems, from the outside, to have sharpened something. People who go through illness often describe a recalibration, a sense of what matters and what does not, a revised relationship with time and with the body, a willingness to be more fully themselves in whatever time they have. It would be presumptuous to claim certainty about what Catherine's experience of illness changed in her. But, looking at the way she carried herself through February 2026, the confidence in the orange coat, the ease in the flat loafers, the complete absence of anything tentative about the BAFTA gown choice, it is hard not to notice that she seemed to occupy herself more fully than she ever had before. More certain, somehow. More at home in her own choices. Her sister-in-law and the broader context of the royal family were not absent from February 2026. The month was shaped by difficult news about Prince Andrew's arrest, and the Crown was navigating one of its more turbulent media periods in recent years. Against that backdrop, Catherine and William's consistent public appearances, their warmth with communities, their color-coordinated BAFTAs entrance, and the quiet authority of her fashion choices functioned as something the institution badly needed: stability. Not just the performance of stability, but the kind that reads as genuine because the person behind it has actually been through something and come out the other side. Catherine's clothes said, in February 2026, what she was also saying with her presence and her work and her carefully constructed public engagements. She had been away. She was back. She had not come back smaller. In the history of royal fashion, a history that runs from Queen Alexandra's stately Edwardian silhouettes to Princess Diana's power shoulders and cocktail dresses to the contemporary precision of Catherine's own wardrobe, there are certain moments that crystallize a particular era's sensibility. The pink Gucci gown at the 2026 BAFTAs will likely be one of those moments. Not because of the gown alone, but because of what surrounded it, the story of the woman wearing it, the diamonds she borrowed from history, the husband in burgundy beside her, the 3 years of absence that preceded the return, and the quiet work of school visits and community days and woolen mill tours that made the red carpet moment feel like it was earned. Catherine, Princess of Wales, wore a lot of clothes in February 2026. She wore tangerine orange to a Welsh mill. She wore brown flats to a primary school. She wore century-old diamonds to Britain's most glamorous film awards. She wore a daffodil on her lapel in the rain. And, through all of it, she was unmistakably, completely herself, which is, when you think about it, the hardest thing to be, and the most elegant thing anyone can wear.